Continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to welcome back Melissa Hayes. Melissa started researching her family during her college years in 1979. Many years and lots of generations later, she is still looking for missing family members. Melissa, a native of Charles County, Maryland, moved all the way to Houston and found her Maryland relatives at Clayton. She graduated with a Master of Library Science and a Graduate Academic Certificate in Youth Services from the University of North Texas in 2008. She has worked at the Houston Public Library System since 2004. She accepted the position of Assistant Branch Manager at the Clayton Library Center for Genealogical Research in June 2013. Her areas of research include Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky, and lineage societies and ghost stories, and she's also a member of the DAR. Today, she's going to be giving you clues to find your adopted family members or birth families. That's right, some of us have an adopted parent who's looking for birth parents and siblings. We will share some of the processes that can be used to bring birth parents back together with their children and find missing siblings. So I'd like to offer a warm virtual welcome to Melissa.
Thank you. All right. Today we're going to talk about adoption, searching for clues. So I'm going to start out with a commercial. The names in some instances are related to me personally, and I am sharing this journey with you to help you find your adoptees. So we want to start out with mentally preparing yourself for the journey. Check yourself along the way, and it's okay to let it go and pick up the journey later. Seek out others who are searching and starting the same journey, and learn to accept what you find. So let's get started with a little background history. 17th through the 19th century, adoption records were known as apprenticeship or indentures. Children were taken in by relatives. Communities paid for the support through fines and taxes. Poorhouses and farms were established, children's homes, and so on and so forth. The paper trail to follow consists of probate records, apprenticeships, indentured documents, and our guardian records, and court records. Formalized adoptions started around 1930, the ones that we know of today, by laws established to protect the child and or the unwed parent. But there are always exceptions to the rule. So let's talk about adoption versus abandoned children. Adoption places a child with parents that are not blood related. Does not always include children that are raised by their grandparents or aunts or uncles or their siblings, because they didn't always go through the adoption process. So abandoned children were generally those placed in orphanages where the parents paid for their upkeep until they no longer had funds, orphans because of parents' death, or those that have lost income, or today we talk about a lot of the unhomed children. In the past, they were taken off the streets by sheriffs or do-gooders and considered neglected or abused children. And today we talk about it as foster care children. Some were sent to grandparents or relatives to work on the farm for room and board. And consider the time period you're looking for. Back in the 20s and 30s, it's different than it is today in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, things to search for at home: family papers, legal documents, newspapers or articles with court docket information. Others would be legal or outright release of parental rights, legal notices in the paper, or sometimes you can find them in the business section under business notices for name changes, birth record amendments. If were in the military and you were trying to bring a child back with your wife, you needed to have transportation records of the family members, and you had to declare them to the military. If you didn't, you were in trouble, and your children may be left behind along with the wife. Pictures. No baby pictures, no pictures in scrapbooks, maybe because there weren't any to add. Business cards from lawyers, adoption and or foster care agency information. Those are all the types of things you may find at home or are with adoptive parents. They want to keep those things separate. And then write down the stories you remember hearing or gossip when adults get together. So they could give you clues to more information. So we think of adoption today as always existing or these rights and regulations always being available. Well, that's not always true. Back in the 1930s, this is an article from the Washington, D.C. Sun. It's 1939, and they are still debating whether adoption should go through the federal agencies, the welfare services, or those baby brokers or nonprofit agencies or agencies set up to house children. Another one is those that are through the conditions of war. 1945, Detroit Evening Times, they are talking about the formalized adoption rights that we know today, like going to court in secret with the parents and the adoptive parents, a welfare worker, and the court deciding who gets the child. Making sure that the Department of Welfare in each state is knowledgeable about what's going on in these cases. Making sure that parents, both parents, father and mother, have the right to give up their child. A lot of times there were bones of contention. Maybe the father did or the mother did not want to give up these children. And then also their legal responsibilities. Well, they also had court hearings and closed or sealed records. And they created a 4-month cooling off period, you might say. A newborn child can be taken from their mother, put in a foster agency, and giving her time to make up her mind. A lot of times, the child was whisked away and adopted without their consent. And then the list goes on. So even today in the Houston Post, right here in Houston, in 1995, there was a very big court case. The mother wanted to give her children up for adoption. She had 2 little boys. The parents on both sides, grandparents, had no idea these children were available for adoption. And her husband was incarcerated, and he had no idea he had 2 sons. So it went to court. A lot of the information was created in the court system by the Baby Richard case, the same type of thing. The father did not give up his parental rights. And in this case, the father, even though he was incarcerated, did not give up his rights. So these are the things you want to look for while you're starting your adoptee and search, because maybe one of the parents that you're looking for didn't give up their rights and they took it to court. So where are we going to start? We're going to start with the census. Then we're going to go to probate and court records, vital records, newspapers, social media today, Google it. And while you're doing this, check your stress level. It's a very stressful search and situation. Check the time period that you're looking for, know the states and what their laws pertain to, review what you have and write it down. Create a timeline or those stories so you can go back and look and see where you might search over again. So here we go. Census clues. You're looking for children who have different surnames from the families that they're listed with. Look to see if they are in an orphanage or a group home, Catholic charities or religious charities or agencies in the area. They were also known as asylums. Look for boys and girls schools, juvenile facilities, industrial schools. Find the names of the institutions or hospitals to search for in the census and city directories. Research it online, and we're going to see one with the magic of AI. And note, not all children's parents willingly gave up their children. So I'm going to take you on my journey through the census. Here we have Ellis Flanagan. It's the 1930 census. He was born in 1930. He's 2 months old, and he's living in Virginia. It lists him with his father, Francis, his mother, Ellen, Daniel, Edward, and George, his brothers, and there's little baby Alice. Now let's see where he's living. He's living with his parents in Buckingham County, Virginia. And here they are all listed. So here we have Francis J. Flanagan in the 1930 census. He was born in 1930. He's still listed as 0, but he's listed as 1 month old. And we find Francis J. Flanagan, Stager Flanagan, Daniel P., Edward M., George S., and Francis J. And he's living in Prince George's, Kent County, Maryland. Well, the clues here are the father is still Francis J. Daniel, Edward, and George are the same. His mother's name is Stager. If you saw my presentation on asylums, his mother is on the way to the asylum. And his name, Francis J., is now replaced his birth name, Ellis. So the adoption process has started. Today, you would find him with those helpful hints in ancestry as Joseph Francis. And we see him in the 1940 census and his Social Security application, his 1950 census. And with the magic of AI, they have finally put him together in the 1930 census as Ellis. And this is my father. He was adopted as an infant. And they finally put him together. I have found before they did AI, and this is very recent, the 2 different censuses had him moving from one place to the other, and now they've put him together. And the only other document that puts him together as Joseph Francis and Ellis Flanagan is through his original birth certificate, which is no longer available on any database. So we're going to continue with this family. Francis J. Flanagan, his wife is now Jeanette. She was the first wife. We have John, William, Rosa, James, Thomas, and baby Charlie. So here he is. Baby Charlie, again, is 0. Thomas, they have a question mark. James, Rosa, William, James again, and Jeanette. Jeanette is the first wife of Joseph J. Flanagan, and these are his first family, my dad's half brothers and sisters. So let's look at Charlie. Here we have Charlie. He is in the adoption records as Chaz Peter Flanagan. In 1930, he's listed as living in a household under Flanagan, and then the story changes again, so he's listed as a McAllister. In the 30s, he's living with the McAllister family. So let's see what happens. Well, we're going to find that in a few minutes. So we're going to go to court records. We're going to see what happens to Charlie. Sometimes there aren't any court records or not where you're expecting them to be. So we're going to look through probate records. We're going to add those vital records and check your stress level. So legal records are not always accessible, and sometimes they're not where you think they're going to be. So this is a Tennessee will and probate record, and she has written a letter to the court asking for her child, James Lee, to be legally adopted by Christy Woodson. She has not lived with her child. Christy Woodson took care of this child while she was recovering. And if you'll notice, it says the probate. You'll notice that the child died the same year that the child was born. So this is a clue that adoption is taking place, because usually a child doesn't die with a will intact in the same year. So you want to look at this when it says there's a probate date and then a death date that are the same year. So this is the legal document. James Lee, his mother, and you'll see it's crossed out at the top, was a McNary, and it went through the court system, and the baby was awarded to Christy Woodson. And there's about 4 pages in the case, and his name was changed. So if you were looking for James Lee, you would look in Ancestry, put in the word adoption after the child's name, and it generally will come up. This case was filed February of 18th, 1929, and you see the adoption records were not closed. It tells you the minute book and the page number. You can go to see the record. Now, when I looked through this case and I went to the next case, those documents were all turned backwards, so you could not see anything about the case. But if it has the same roll or reel of film, it has the page numbers, and you as a searcher maybe could go to the courthouse and ask nicely and see the original record. So we have another one. This was another petition, Dorothy Darlene Carter. Again, her will was probated 1930, and her inferred death was 1930. It lists the case number and the probate packet. She's living with her grandmother. She's a resident in Jackson County. Her mother is deceased and her father is unknown. And she's asking the court to allow Dorothy Darlene Carter to be adopted by another family. She's given her consent and permission. And here is the rest of the adoption. So the family that wanted Dorothy Darlene Carter, the child, and it goes on for the entire docket, it's about 6 pages, is given consent to adopt the child. So her grandmother, who is unable to take care of her, and her daughter is deceased. Now, remember we talked earlier about Charles Flanagan, the baby? Well, Charles Flanagan, the baby, was listed as Chaz Peterfield, and you see it's crossed out and has McAllister. At the top in red, it's an amended certificate. In legal circumstances, you would not be able to see the document at all, but I don't believe this was a formal adoption. I believe he was, as our story goes, given away at his mother's funeral. And in order to go into the military and come out listed as a McAllister, he had to go to court and get the birth certificate amended so that he could get his military pension and also to apply for Social Security. He had to prove that his name had changed. So all they did was strike out Flanagan and put in McAllister. But it actually lists his parents, which we saw earlier, Francis Joseph Flanagan from Farmville and Jeanette Worm from Farmville. And at the bottom in smaller print, it says that the name is established by city ordinance of the court in Shenandoah County, Virginia, dated 6/27/1945. However, it was not officially recorded until 6/14/1973. So you may come across records like this one where the birth certificate has been amended and a new one created, or if it wasn't totally a legal official adoption, it would go in and be amended. And for whatever reason, they did not destroy, as we see here, the original birth certificate and create a new one. When I was looking through some other information yesterday, this was one that appeared. This is in Augusta, Virginia. And for whatever reason, over the page in the birth record, a delayed certificate was submitted and issued on July 6, 1942, and they changed the name William Cummings Liddy, and his original birth date was December 29th, 1890. And it copies right over the top of the original birth listings in the record. And here at the end, it's kind of hard to see who it is because you see those squiggly lines at the bottom. It looks like MM, and he's a farmer. And MM River is the location, and then sort of a squiggly line at the end. It also has another notation, and you may find this when you're looking for your family member, a typed statement posted to record on each certificate the name change that was done on 7/6/1942. I just found this, believe it or not, yesterday and added it to the presentation. So I think after this presentation, I'm going to look this up and see what information I can find about William and why his name was changed. Was it a formal adoption? Probably. Or was it a mistake in recording the original document? Even marriage licenses can give you clues and information about adoptions. This is actually a marriage application for a license, and William Black lists his adopted parent as Mary and mother, and William H. Dorwich and his wife Rebecca are giving permission for his daughter Clara Alice to marry William Scott Black. A good finding clue is he's working for the railroad as a brakeman, and she's a dressmaker. So a clue would be to go look through the railroad records to see if there's more information about William Black and his adopted mother, Mary, and see maybe it will mention his father, or it may mention his birth parents if he ended up with a pension and the adoption wasn't recorded legally. And here it is. It shows it in a little bit easier to read. William Black, of adoption, Mary, mother. And they were married. So I've mentioned before Francis Flanagan. Well, we have his original adoption, and there's some clues that lets us know that it wasn't exactly legal. Even though it was filed, according to the papers, in the Supreme Court, the District of Columbia, it has Francis J. Flanagan, infant, filed, this is a clue, July 29th, 1931. It mentions his parents. It mentions his adoptive parents, Clark M. and Ruby Boswell. And down when it has his birth date, it has February 22nd, 1929. He was originally born February 22nd, 1930. So how could you put a birth date that didn't exist? Because the census record and his original birth certificate both have 1930. It also says that the parents are not financially able to rear or educate the child. Here we go. This is the petition of Clark M. Boswell and Ruby, his wife, to prove their citizenship in the District of Columbia and that they are legally husband and wife. Another clue that they can financially raise this child, that he was born, again, another misprinting, the second day of February 1929, and that they're living on South Dakota Avenue. At the time, that is correct. However, says the petitioners have been married since 12 May 1923. They were not married. I have their marriage license until 1933. It also says they have adequate income. And if you look at them in the 1930 census, neither one of them are employed. So I specifically believe this was kind of a little bit of payola to get this done. So you might look to see if the records in the courthouse are actually correct to what you know and that it was done legally. So here they are, Clark M. Boswell and Mrs. Ruby Boswell signing this petition. Not a legal document. So here we have Lucy Bell. She's in West Virginia, and this is a will. It is a will of Julia Ann Perrell, her husband Barney. There's Emma Gertrude Jackson, Thomas Fountain, Lucy Bell, Catherine Ellen Jackson, and S. Howard Brown. And the three kids are adopted children of, believe it or not, Emma Gertrude Jackson, and they're living with Jane Ann Perrell and her husband. So let's look at this adoption record. So this is Jane Ann's will. She's of sound mind and body. She leaves property to her husband. On the next page, she leaves property to her daughter, Emma Grace Jackson, through her natural life, as long as she never marries again. Her first son is named Thomas Fountain. Her second son and daughter is Lucille Bell and Catherine Ellen Jackson. And they are left property from grandmother, Jane Ann Perrell. And if the daughter, Emma, marries again, the children inherit and she does not. And most of the benefit will go to Thomas Fountain. He is a disabled child living in the household. So these are other sources you might want to look for to see if the children were adopted. And in a lot of earlier probate records, they actually, as we see here, listed them. And we have clues that Emma Gertrude married a Jackson and also a Fountain. So those are more places to look for more information. So here we show my father had to change his name legally because he had 3 different names. As we saw before, he was Ellis. He was Ellis Hoover Flanagan. Then he became Francis Joseph, and then he was adopted and became Joseph Francis. So in the process of going through the adoption process and changing his name to his legal name, he asked the court and the lawyer if he could go to the St. Mary's Industrial School in Baltimore and get the records of his 2 brothers, Edward and Daniel. So this is a copy of Daniel's stay at the St. Mary's Industrial School and the St. James Home for Boys. And it also says when he is his baptism in the 2 schools and how long he was there, and that they allowed him to sign up for the military. Well, he wasn't asked, he was signed up and told to sign the document. And we had already gone there to the St. Mary's Industrial School to Catholic Charities and asked for the information. They gladly gave it to us, as in genealogy, random acts of kindness. The lady put everything out on the table, said she had to leave the room. The copier was over there and she'd be back. So we got the information prior to this, and some of the information on this document doesn't have all the information. We got more than the document. So random acts of genealogical kindness may get you more information. So let's talk about city directories. We always use city directories in our research to find more clues. If you know where the person or children were living or located at the time, then you want to look for adoption agencies, hospitals, churches, city or community services, home for unwed mothers, immigrant asylums, and places like that for family relationships. You can also find those agencies that will help you find more information if you can locate where the adoption took place, or if you know a lawyer, or if you know an agency, you can get an address to get more information. Sometimes you can actually locate the adoptive parents in relationship to where the birth parents were living if you can unearth them through your research. So this is a city directory, and it is in Muskegon, Michigan, and it talks about the children's home. It talks about that they have institutional care, foster care, adoption placement, counseling for unwed mothers. You will see that a lot. Family counseling services, their phone number at the time, and also the administrator. So this is another one. If you use just the word adoption, and I have no idea how you pronounce those other words, I think it was just a typo. This is actually in 1957, and it's in Kansas, and it talks about Kansas Children's Services League, counseling for unwed mothers, and all the services they have. So if you find information at home that has some of these advertisements in it, or business cards, you can look them up and it may give you other clues. See if the agencies are still available so that you can contact them and nicely ask if they have any records, or could give you a clue as to where these records might be kept. So we all know that sometimes you hit a brick wall. So you might want to consult book sources at the library talking about abstracts, wills and probate records, children home records. A lot of Hamilton County, Ohio records are becoming available. They're being abstracted. You can also search for names in the communities, the heritage books. It gives you an idea of what is in the community. And you never know, someone may put a family history in the back of the book that may have a child listed as being my adopted son or my adopted daughter. So you can look for clues for names in those book resources. So books, and more books. So we talked about city directories. We talked about those heritage books. Heritage books talks about a state or a county, gives you a little information about the services they have, the churches in the community, the cemeteries in the community, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, a little history about the community. And then in the back, a lot of times it has those bibliographies or bibliographic information about the people in the community. You pay to get your name put in there, so you can write a nice little synopsis about the family. So look in them for adoption information. Newspaper abstracts, state and county information. We're going to get to that. Reference book sources about adoption, the processes and procedures. Topical orphan train, poorhouse information, homes and institutions, and support groups. It's very emotional. A lot of times you will not find the information you're looking for, or you may find the adoption records and you may find the parents. You may find that they're very happy to meet you and with open arms, and you will find sometimes people go to the houses or call them on the phone, they knock on the door and the door is slammed in their face. So these support groups are very helpful. They also have support groups online and Facebook to support you in your search. They can also give you tips and tricks more so than I have. Some of the adoption resource books you will find are very negative about the process, and others will tell you they're very upbeat about the process and really help you. So things I didn't mention. We could go on forever about adoption. Orphan train riders. Some were adopted, others ran away to start a new home or new lives. Some died on the journey. Others became servants in the households or unwanted children in small or large families. A lot of them were in families where they had no children and children arrived and they were displaced. Yet others were loved, well cared for, and became members of families. They were supposed to write letters and contact the New York Children's Aid Society. A lot of those records never were sent, and a lot of the children were not formally adopted. The train rides were from 1854 to 1929. And there are numerous books on orphan train riders. We have a 4-volume set right here at Clayton. So look for those sources as well. Military kids, war babies, and those international adoptions. You want to look for records on Fold 3 for military and war babies. Germany sent over quite a few, Korea and Vietnam with the mixed race children. There are groups searching from these places to the United States and vice versa. Native American Alaska, when it was Russia adoptions, and then international adoptions. So those are things, again, a whole nother presentation. So newspapers, you want to look for legal notices for terminating parental rights. A lot of them include the child's name and are facts about the adoptive parents. and with the legal action being pursued. Court cases, hearings pertaining to adoption related issues. If it was a divorced wife or a father giving their child up for adoption, they would have to put it in the paper. Or if the divorcee would like the new father or new wife to adopt the child. You're going to find those in notices, legal notices, and now today they're going to be in the business section under legal notices. And those court cases and hearing pertaining to them and related issues, they have to be advertised in the paper for so many months. Locate adoption lawyers or courthouse records, clerks, judges, legal representatives, birth and or other related information in those court documents. They have to be in the newspaper if you're going to have a child's name changed. In the past, you could actually find the first and last name of the child. A few of them you still can, but now a lot of time it's not. It's Jane Doe and then the parents, because they're the ones that are going to have to be in the petition. Background information and or community time period information, major events like flu deaths, weather-related deaths, they're going to be in the paper talking about the children that are left behind. So let's look at some of them. This is a petition for the adoption of a young man, William, and he's age 11, and it was granted, and his name was changed, and it was given by the consent of his father to have his child adopted. This was October 1st, 1908. This one is in 1963 in the Republican in Oakland, Maryland, and it's the petition. It has the court petition and the case number, and it is about the adoption and changing of a name from Christina Louisa Hartung. She was born June 26, 1957, and it was a court order by the petitioner to have the adoption made legal in 1963 and giving notice to Christina's father, Roy T. Hartung, so that he could adopt this young lady. So look in, again, the legal docket cases. So it gives you the court docket, the number, and the case number, so you could go back and see if this petition was granted. And I can tell you it did. So here we have another one. It's a legal notice. Have a transcription on one side. It's in the Milwaukee Journal. This is 1895. And this is an application for adoption of Edward K. West and Mary H. West, his wife, and they are adopting a minor child. Her name is Lillian Rickett, and she's listed as an abandoned child, and they are looking for the adoptive parents so that they can have the child become legally theirs. And the parents are listed at the bottom, Frank Rickers and Vivian, his wife, and they claim that his wife abandoned him, and they're willing to he is willing to give up his daughter for adoption. And you'll find these in the legal notices of the paper. So now we come to searching for information on your own without using those legal documents. There are a lot of social media, Facebook page, Pinterest, Twitter, for family name searches. There are adoptions organizations that are on these platforms. They can help you go through the information. They can counsel you. They can give you all sorts of help for finding adoptee information. DNA helps. excuse me. You can also locate information from state adoption agencies, state health departments, and all states have some form of state adoption agency information and state health department information. You want to look for vital records, just like I did. You can go to Ancestry or Family Search and look for vital records. Look for those augmented or changed documents, or you can try and find originals. I have it on authority from adoptees here in Texas that if you know the amended birth certificate number, that you can take that number and go back in the records for the date they were born and the place they were born to find the original certificate that wasn't destroyed by using those certificate numbers. It doesn't go past the 1960s, but those earlier adoption records, this works. It takes quite a bit of doing, but it can be done. You can hire a detective, and remember random acts of genealogical kindness. If you approach it kind of backwards, don't ask for specifics. Say, I'm doing a little bit of searching for this particular person. Can you tell me where I might search? A lot of times they will help you. So what you want to do is create a family timeline, check dates and facts, prove or disprove the stories that you know, write down what you remember so you can use those for clues. Look online for lawyer or legal information from the documents that you may have. Search the law for the states where the adoption or birth took place. Keep in mind the adoption might be in another state if the birth took place out of state and the child was taken from their mother for that 4-month waiting period. You might check in the locality where she was at the time of the birth. Look for birth certificates, death certificates, social security information, social security indexes, church records, mental hospitals, home for foster mothers, home for unwed mothers, military records, prison records, and the list goes on. DNA does help. I have known a few persons that have used DNA to find information, and genealogy, random acts of kindness. Our journey through adoption is our own personal family journey. Some of us will find the answers we seek, and others will not. Always remember the stories and write it down. Any questions?
Okay, I'll open up the floor to the students. Give it a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a question, please unmute your microphone, but leave your camera off and ask the question, and then please mute your microphone back. I hear some rustling.
I don't have a question, but I did want to bring something up. Earlier, she was talking about the railroads, and I found when I was doing research, there's actually the Railroad Retirement Board, and the employees that work for the railroad were listed there, and I was able to find my grandfather, and it's a great source for information.
Wonderful. Yes, you are correct. Yes. The railroad also did insurance for a lot of churches. My grandfather's Methodist church pension came through the railroad.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, they paid the he was more of an evangelist, but he was a Methodist minister, Methodist Episcopal Church minister. And yes, that's where his pension came from, the railroad insurance.
Oh my gosh. Well, while I'm waiting for the rest of the class to come up with more questions, if you have time, do you mind demoing on your screen and sharing it with us, Ancestry, about how you found that, I found that interesting how you said search for James Lee adoption. So did you
Yeah,
use the word adoption in the keyword search?
I did. I went to Ancestry and I just put in the name, putting in a name, and then put the word adoption. Thousands of records come up because they use the term adoption.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have time to share that just to kind of demo it to this class?
Let's see. Let me see. Let
I
me
have a
stop.
question while she's doing that.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Any idea what it takes for an adoptee to prove their relationship for being able to get into the DAR?
Well, sure. Do you have the adoption information? Do you have I did it for my dad's side of the family. He had his adoption records because he was in the military, and he had 3 different names. So they gave him the information.
Georgia is a sealed state, and we are unable to get our records. What about through Ancestry records?
You could try. Yes, you could try. Look them up and see if they show up. How long ago was the adoption?
1960.
Yeah, well, it might. It might.
Because
I would,
my cousin's working on a lot of the Ancestry stuff
uh-huh,
on my biological side, which is his biological side. And he has come up with a lot of DAR connections,
right,
but it's a matter of what I need that he's got that I can use to get in.
right, right. Okay, let's see. Let's go to search.
I have one more comment for Cindy. You may be able to use DNA. The DAR is accepting 3 generations.
True, and I forgot that. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Meaning that I can only go back 3 generations to prove it?
That's correct. It has to be
Okay.
within the current 3 within 3 generations.
And
Thank
Cindy,
you. That's good to know.
Cindy, that information also, if you go to the DAR webpage and just type in DNA, it probably pop right up and it gives you the specific ways in which you can use DNA. Okay, now it's up. Okay, we see it. Birth, marriage, and death records.
Yeah, I would just go adoption. Sometimes I would actually go down here.
More panic alarms. That was great. She had to get to it though. I think having something either
Hold on, let me find out who's got their audio on. Here, hold on.
There. So this is one search I would do. I would just put in adoption and records come up with the last name adoption. And then you would just click on them.
This is so interesting for me. I've never done a search with just the word adoption in the Ancestry keyword. This is really interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So you never, oh, this one looks like it's a death certificate. Yes, single parent adoption. Wow. You never know. Yeah, doing this, I found that, well, the story was that the brothers were given away, the kids were given away at the death of the first wife. And just pulling up the kids in the census record, I've actually found another child. I don't know what happened to him. I believe he died. But there's a George Albert that I knew nothing about, and he was born in 1917. And all I have is his birth certificate.
Now, I imagine when you put in the word adoption, you could probably narrow that down by year and by location, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you mind backing up one click and kind of let's demo that with Yeah, one more click back. Let's do the location and time period.
Okay, let's go back. Let's edit. Yeah, and I actually did it at both, so I can always take out one and then go back up and say 1940, and then go down and search. And then you could do gender. So this one's only 22.
Oh my gosh.
So they tried to block out some of the information by putting in adopted, and this one probably was a foster. Now for us, we don't have the newspapers, but it would give you the newspaper to look for. Or you could put in a name, or you could narrow it down by gender.
So if you had the like, let's say the maiden name of the mother who was an
Uh-huh.
unwed mother, you could put that in there too to help further filter it if the mother's name is on the original record.
Yeah. Or you could just take that out and put in Mary Ellen. Oops. The parent. Well, I don't need it to be capital, but and then stick them in, and again, anybody with that name, and then you can narrow it down because this is a lot. But you can narrow it down, say I'm just interested in her death or her birth, and it comes up with anyone with that name. And then you could go back and put in adopted.
Oh gosh, okay. Wow. Yeah, I noticed Marilyn just put into the chat box, she says, wonder is family search would it have items with adoption in the name? No, one,
Yes.
yes, yeah, wonder is. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's see if Catherine says, can you repeat information about birth certificate numbers? I have a birth certificate for my stepdad, and I've tried to figure out his bio dad. I know his mom and proved his maternal line through, although he was adopted. Again, talk about birth certificate numbers. Thank you.
So when they have a birth certificate here in Texas, instead of destroying the original one, it's been found that if you take the current birth certificate, it has a certificate number and it has the date of their birth and where they were born. And if you go back to the year they were born, find the date and look for the certificate number on the birth certificates that year, then you should be able to find the original parents.
Wow, that's fascinating. My gosh. Do you mind demoing it on Family Search?
I have not done it personally
Oh, okay.
because I have no one in Texas. Mine are all in Maryland. The one that I did find was the Chaz. That was just out there in the blue. I just put in his first name and McAllister because he was listed under McAllister in the census, and his birth certificate pops up as amended.
Wow.
So you just keep searching in all different ways, and sometimes it just comes up.
Yeah, you also mentioned something else that really caught my attention. You mentioned war babies searching on fold 3. Can you demo that as well?
Probably not. Let me see if I can go back to fold 3 and share. There.
Okay, now we see it.
I just did the same thing and did it as a name or a keyword search. Let me go back. And then it brings up with the subject heading. Some of it is adoption. We had the Bayland here in Texas, but it's all documents related to things they purchased or the board of directors, not adoption records. But you can find some of them in the newspapers. And then it would have things like, let's see what this one comes up as. Yeah, records.
So now what about filtering? If you, with Ancestry, that seems pretty easy, but can you only sort this by wartime, like Revolutionary War or Civil War or World War I?
Yes. Yeah, you have to do it by the war. And then it brings up a whole bunch of different records. Some of them are letters, some of them are actual documents from the military saying, you didn't declare such and such a child. So you have to fill out the paperwork in order to bring them back. There are also articles in military newspapers that talk about children being brought over for adoption, Korea, Vietnam, Germany, a lot of, I just call them do-gooders, figured that since they were over there with lots of extra children running around, they would pick them up and bring them back. Some of the German children were used to negotiate. They would bring back children to the United States and negotiate with the Germans to release prisoners, you might say, to send them back.
Goodness. Wow. Now, I imagine you could probably put in a surname and then the word adoption, right?
Yes.
You need the name. And then
Yeah.
filter it by time period, like
Right.
which war period. Wow, this
Yeah.
is fascinating. I had no idea. Okay, well, this is great. Wonderful tips. What class, do you have any questions for Melissa? I mean, this is a lot to take in, but I would think that there'd be some questions here. No? Oh my goodness. Okay.
No.
Okay,
Well,
well,
I've got a couple comments that you might be interested in.
okay, go ahead.
Absolutely.
I was born in a clinic/hospital called Southtown in Chicago, and it was strictly a clinic for unwed mothers. And one thing is they're no longer there, but I'd like to know whatever happened to the records. And my research on that particular hospital leads to something else that might be of interest. Everything points that hospital was one of the ones throughout the United States that were supported by a Dr. Hicks out of Georgia. And I don't know if anybody knows that name, but Dr. Hicks ran a unwed mother's clinic in Georgia. And all the big money people there would pay the doctor to have a child that they didn't want disappear. And then he'd turn around and take that child and sell it out of the back door of the clinic to to people that wanted babies, and they never went through the legal proceedings. And hundreds of those babies were found thrown along the side of the road or in dumpsters because they died before they ever made it home. And it's an interesting place for this kind of information. Didn't know if anybody heard about that or not, but I thought I'd pass it on.
Like the orphan trains, unfortunately, there's been some underhanded things that should never have happened, and it's a sad part of our history.
Yes, it definitely is. Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any recommended sources? Do you have any favorite books in your collection about doing genealogy, discovering, adoption?
I do. It's an older book, and I wish the gentleman had, and I gave it to you with the bibliography, and it is called Life Lifeline, The Action Guide to Adoption Search. It was written in 1991. It's an awesome book. It gives you just plain English how to do research on adoption and places to get or guides to get sort of like counseling, because it is such an emotional topic to research, and sometimes it's hard for the adoptees to deal with the fact that sometimes the parents really didn't want their children, or that the adoptions weren't legal. So I love that one. It's not really big, but it's a really good book to use. It was recommended. My dad had a copy. It was recommended. We went to an organization in Virginia called Adoptees in Search, and they helped adoptees find their birth parents, but they also did all the counseling and thing, and this was the book they recommended.
And everyone should have the handout. I sent it in the invitation, in the Zoom
Yes.
invitation. And if anyone missed it, I'll resend it out when I send out the links that we used today, early next week. So if you didn't get it, let me know, and I'll be happy to send everyone the handout again. So, oh, and George just put in the chat box, link to A&E TV story about the production of the Hicks baby is called Taken at Birth. And George gave us a link. So thank you very much, George.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so any other questions for Melissa? Give it just a few seconds here.
Well, I don't have a question, but one other thing I'd like to get out. If we have adoptees out there that are searching, please look up Fireside Adoptees. It's a support group for adoptees. I've been involved in it for a few years now, and they're really good at helping you work through issues on adoption and other things that might come up. And I'll put that in the chat box.
Wonderful. That's great. Oh, and I want to share you a picture of my adoptees. My dad, his brothers, Daniel and Joseph Jackson, and they didn't get to meet each other in person for 75 years.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And my dad and Daniel, the middle one, lived 2 hours apart.
Oh my gosh.
So if they'd have walked by each other on the pavement, they would have recognized the fact they were siblings. And Daniel knew about being adopted, or he was in the industrial school. My dad always knew he was adopted, but Joseph Jackson didn't find out until he was in his 40s.
Wow. You know, it's funny, Melissa, I'm hearing the same story so much more frequently over the last few years, you know, just doing this class. It is amazing how more often this happens than we ever thought possible.
Yes.
And it's really coming out now, like you said, with, you know, DNA and AI, you know, it's really starting to come to the surface now. So what an incredible journey not only your family had, but Randall's, you know, story is unique as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a reality. And I think what I'd like to take away from today's class is that in our, you know, striving to go out into the community and help other people do their genealogy, we're probably going to come across more adoption cases than we ever imagined. And knowing how to face these and not only help people find their biological families, but also, like you said, address the emotional part of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
wonderful. Okay. Well, oh, hold on. Let me see. I just got more things here in the chat box. Let me just see here.
And I missed the name of the book again, Melissa. What was that book you said was the best one?
Lifeline, The Action Guide to Adoption Search. It's under Virgil L. Klugner's, Klunder.
And that's on your list of books that you handed out, right?
Yes, it's the third one from the bottom.
Third one from the bottom.
Yep,
Got it.
start at the bottom and go up.
Okay, I found it. Great. Thank
Yes,
Okay, then Sue wrote down in the chat box, my great grandfather was an orphan train rider along with one brother out of New York. He ended up in Illinois and listed on a census as a servant. My mom just knows something about being in the New York Masonic home. Would like to know what agency put him on the train. His mother had died and his father was still alive.
A lot of the ones on the orphan trains came out of New York, the New York Children's Society. They would they would sweep the streets. They weren't all babies born at the home. If someone found a child that they thought was unattended, they just would pick them up and take them to the orphanage. Or if they were outside playing and they were dirty, they would pick them up and take them.
Oh my goodness, the implications of that are frightening.
Yes, yes. I've found a couple of obituaries where a guy, he had 8 children. He was not married, and he stated I guess the kids wrote it, that he picked them up when he was on business trips.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I know there's a lot of really good books on orphan train, the history of the orphan trains. Do you have any favorites of your own?
I actually put in, let's see, where is it? We have a 4-volume set. Oh, here it is. Mary Ellen Johnson. It's called The Orphan Train Writers and Their Own Stories. It's a 4-volume set. And it's awesome to read. Some of them actually found their original parents and others did not. And then there's another one that's Orphan Trains and Their Precious Cargo, the life work of Reverend H.D. Clark, who started the orphan train.
Wow. Yeah, I know there's so many great sources out there. That's really a topic that's been really well addressed over the last 20 years. There's been some really great publications and articles
Oh,
that
yes.
work
Yeah.
as well. So I want to remind everybody that if you want to have access to our databases to look up ebooks on the orphan trains or articles, please let me know and I'll be happy to send you that guest username and password. So wonderful. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I'll give the class another few seconds here. Okay, Melissa, it looks like you've addressed everyone's questions, and I can't thank you enough once again
Thank
for
you.
an outstanding presentation to the class, and we so greatly appreciate it. And we also appreciate you letting us record today as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Melissa, we'll be in touch soon. And I just sent you an email,
Yes.
by the way, with some information about those books we're talking about.
Wonderful. Great. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. And
Bye.
bye-bye. I'd like
Bye.
to invite the class to stay for the second half of class. Let me stop the recording here. Hold on.